is going to share her. She's going to share her testimony with us today, which I am really looking forward to hearing that, Margaret.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Fiona. I had to write it down, not that I don't remember it, but so that I don't forget it. Yeah. So I was born in 1960 in Bowral. I thought Errol was born in Bowral, but she wasn't. So I'm glad that I didn't say that. Yeah. I was the middle of 5 children who apparently there's a syndrome, but we didn't have the luxury of having. Yeah, we didn't have the luxury of having a syndrome when we were kids. Yeah. Mum was the most wonderful homemaker you could ever have. She was a beautiful cook. She sewed everything. She knitted. She made a wonderful home. She had a wonderful childhood, older parents, so she had a really great view of the world. Dad, on the other hand, he was like a street fighter and a drinker, and he ended up going to Korea. He was a sniper in the Korean War, and he saw some terrible things. He saw his best mate share his 21st birthday cake with them all, and then he stood on a mine and they packed his body, what they could find, into that birthday tin. So that changes people, and I know it changes your brain and you can't change it back. Yeah, he was a champion boxer and he was a violent alcoholic. Sorry. What I'm probably thinking of is Karen's testimony too. Thank you. Now I'll get myself together. Yeah, Karen was a mum who could look after her kids. Oh, Karen was a mum who looked after her kids. My mum couldn't. You know, a young doctor said to her, "Why don't you leave him?" And the older family doctor, when she spoke to him, she said, "How could you leave him? He'd kill you." You know, so he was a very violent man. But we loved him, you know, surprisingly, we loved him. We had some good times, you know, we were in Kangaroo Valley in the bush, we had horses. He was a great bushman, a great horseman. So we had good times, but he had that side of him that was very violent. We didn't know until he was in his 60s when he had to see a psychiatrist to qualify for the total permanent... Yes, yeah, that he had severe post-traumatic stress disorder. So that explained it. And once Mum knew that particularly, it just changed everything for her. She could understand that it was really outside of his control. He had very strict Catholic parents who his dad chased him down a wombat hole with a gun once. So, you know, he had a lot of stuff going on, yeah. We lived in Moss Vale and then moved to Kangaroo Valley to a farm where probably Dad got worse. He'd go to the pub every Friday night and smash the old Land Rover up coming home on the same rock wall without fail, every Friday night, yes. But Dad's brother, Uncle Tony, he lived a few kilometres down the road. He was managing a racehorse property, and he was a Catholic bachelor, a devout Catholic, and he was a wonderful man. He didn't drink, he hadn't been to war, he didn't have kids, so he didn't have much to worry about. But that's... And it's true, Rob. You know, Mum said Dad was a different man before he had kids. It just was too much stress on top of the stress. Yeah, that's right. So Uncle Tony would come and pick us up on Sunday morning and take us to church. Usually just my sister and I went. The boys didn't go. And then on the way home, he'd bring his guitar and he'd get his guitar out on the way home and he'd sing Little Boxes on the Hillside. Was a song I really remember, but it was just a lovely time. You know, it was a peaceful, nice time. And I was thinking about, you know, Pentecost Sunday and those times when, you know, God's hand was really in it, and the Holy Spirit, even though I didn't know him at the time. That's what Uncle Tony was. He was, you know, really from the Spirit of God. And Dad used to say to us we were nothing but useless pieces of... Yeah. But I never believed it. And I think that was probably the first, in thinking about it, the first touch of the Holy Spirit was I didn't believe that. You know, it didn't stick with me. It did with a couple of my siblings. So I left home went back to Barrel to do nursing at 17, and I was a bit like those Amish kids, you know. You got this uncontrolled freedom. So I thought, yes, yeah. I thought, I can go out at 2 o'clock in the morning if I want to. Yeah, you can just do whatever you want. And I did do what I wanted. I started smoking pot when I was 14, probably in the valley. And then when I left home, got in with the wrong crowd, or maybe I was the wrong crowd. I'm not sure. But yeah, got into drugs. My good friend, Robin, she introduced me briefly to heroin at 18, yeah. Lots of people in that time, in the late 70s, died of overdoses. A lot of people that we knew, even though they weren't my friends, they were in the same crowd, yeah. But Robbie had a brother, Gary Mulqueeny, and one morning early, he came in. I was living in a flat with some other girls. He came in and woke me up, and he said, you know, God's got a better life for you than this. And I feel like that was a Holy Spirit moment, yeah. And things didn't really change that much, but it just played on my mind over and over. And when I saw him at Robbie's funeral years later, I reminded him, and he said, well, I don't remember. So you know that's a Holy Spirit, don't you, when you say stuff and you don't remember it. So I briefly used heroin, but kept up the pot, and I think God just really took heroin away after Gary spoke to me. It just I don't remember much. Bad memory anyway, but made worse. Got into all sorts of drugs, you know, magic mushrooms, and went to Luna Park on magic mushrooms. So, my gosh. And, you know, drugs are fun. They're fun and people connect, and that's why people are drawn to it, you know. But life's a whole lot more fun without it. Then I met Dave, who would then become my husband. We had 4 children, and he wasn't into that life. So, you know, he smoked a bit of pot, didn't drink much in those days. So it all just kind of fizzled out. I didn't hang around with those people. So a few years later, and I wish I could remember time frames, but I can't. But Mum and I went to a church in Barrel that was at the high school, just in a classroom. And maybe it was Denise and Maury Grace. And they don't know what they talked about, but then they had an altar call, and I just said to Mum, I think I'm going to go forward for that. And she said, I think I might come too. So we both did that together. Yeah, it was. It was. But there was no bells and whistles. There was no fanfare at all. They just did it, and it was done. You know, it was, yeah. I'd accepted Jesus, and that was that. I know, a bit of fanfare, but, you know, would have been good. But God didn't let me go, you know. He just, you know, I sort of still was doing what I shouldn't be doing, but he didn't condemn me either. And, you know, I really wanted to be... When Nettie and I went to the Catholic Church in Berrima, and then somehow we found ourselves at a spirit-filled church in Mittagong, which was the best thing that could have ever happened, Highland Christian Church, where I learnt a lot about what God really thinks about us and what we mean to him. So I really wanted to be baptised in the Holy Spirit because other people were, and I wasn't. So I went to an all-night meeting, and in the early hours, these strange words started coming out. But again, there was no Pentecost moment. It was there, you know. And so God doesn't have to be this big, it's just God does what he does, when he does it, And then I went to Barrel Church when it was Wattle Creek, and they did a teaching from Derek Prince on healing, and it was the most wonderful teaching, and what came out of it was that I carried a lot of shame and fear from childhood. You know, that's what happens to abused kids. You know, we were abused in every way as children, so it affects you, But I was really released from that. I was set free from shame and fear on that day. It was a whole day thing, and I was able to forgive Dad completely, And we had a wonderful relationship, yeah. I talked to him about God, and he just had so much pain tied up with his parents, and you know, what did the song say? Throw off your tradition and your religion, So so that was a defining moment for me. And another big one was I met Frank at Barrel Hospital because I worked in pathology, and Frank was an Olympian. He was a runner. He was a self-confessed insurance salesman, womanizer, boozer. He was all of it. And he'd come into the hospital regularly because he was frequently sick. He was an elderly man. And one day he said, in high dependency, he said, the doctor told me I could die at any minute. And I said, well, Frankie, you're a man of faith. And he said, no, I don't believe in that stuff. And I said, well, I do, and I'm going to pray for you. And he's good-o. And I don't even know if I did pray for him, but 2 days later I went back in and he's like, come here quick. And I went over and he said, you know, that last time I saw you, he said that night, he said, I think I died, but I had a dream, and I was walking along this dusty road, and there were some men on big boulders, and as I walked up to them, they stood up. And he said, you won't believe who one of them was. And he said it was Jesus. And this is an unbelieving man who had no faith at all. He just wanted good times. And I'm like, wow, that's amazing. And he said, you know how I know it was Jesus? He said, the love in his eyes, I have never seen or felt anything like that before. And I could see it in his eyes. And it was like the Holy Spirit let me see this great love that God has for us through this man. Yeah. So he believes he died, and I believe he did too. He was a very sick man. But he lived another 6 weeks, and McGowan went and, you know, spent time with him, and we moved him into a nursing home and all of that sort of thing. He had a funeral. He wasn't going to have a funeral, but he told everybody, anybody who'd listen, he told about this amazing encounter he'd had. So, yeah, it was very powerful. So the years rolled on, and I found myself going in an unexpected direction, which is what led me to here. My husband decided after 37 years he didn't want to be married anymore. So Mum had just died, and I went into her house to stay there and get it ready for sale and things. So I ended up being there a whole year. And thinking, where am I going to go and what am I going to do? And then we decided to come to Goulburn and have a look with my daughter. Looked at a couple, and then this one, it just everything just opened up, you know. Looked twice, and yes, we'll have it, you know. Don't know how we're going to get the money, but the money came. It was miraculous, really. How God, it was just incredible that this money from different directions, they were all willing to send it my way. And so here we are in Goulburn, you know, to the glory of God. He did. Yeah, and I'm so happy to be here. It's just a wonderful place. So I just really got to thank God that he never left me. He never left me to my own devices. I think I'd be dead if he had have. Just his grace, and so many times through the years there's been little things, like you all know, the little things that he does. You know, we were looking at buying a block of land and couldn't get it, and it was tied up in a court case. And then I went there, we were in the bush, and there was just a little clear track, and God just said, I've made the way clear for you. And it did, it all just unfolded, you know, just so many times, you know, pregnant, anxious about delivery, and God gave me a dream of scissors and paper. You know, you've got the tools that you need to do the job, and just God's never left me. He's never let me down, and thank God he doesn't hold it against me when I let him down. Yeah. So onward and upward. Yeah. Thank you.
Wow, that was awesome, Marg. But I said when we first started, I would not go without an altar call. Now, I don't know where everyone's heart is. I don't know if you're close to God, or if you've accepted him and walked away, or if you're not sure if you were to die that you would go straight to heaven. That's a simple question. Has a simple answer. But if the answer you've just said in your head is, I hope so, come out the front and let me pray with you.